Today's episode of the Winter Growers Podcast is brought to you by Growing for Market magazine. Which crops will pay back your investment in a hoop house or greenhouse? How does managing a greenhouse through the winter differ from summer growing? And which crops can just be overwintered in the field? Learn all that and more by subscribing to Growing for Market magazine. The writers are farmers, not journalists. They won't tell you how to grow, they'll tell you how they grow, so you can decide what works for your farm. Growing for Market is celebrating 30 years of helping local food and flower growers succeed with articles written by experienced farmers from around North America. Since 1992, Growing for Market is by farmers, for farmers. Plus, subscriptions start at only $30 per year. Whether you do farmers markets, local wholesaling, a CSA, or dream of starting a farm, check them out today at growingformarket.com. Request a free sample print or digital copy from their website, and podcast listeners can get a new subscriber discount of 25% off with the code WINTER when subscribing at growingformarket.com. I think Growing for Market magazine is an excellent and affordable resource for any grower. Today's show is also brought to you by Johnny's Selected Seeds.
Johnny's Selected Seeds is a proud sponsor of the Winter Growers Podcast. Since 1973, Johnny's has supported farmers and gardeners with superior seeds, innovative tools, and pertinent information to help feed their families and communities and ensure their growing success. Our 40-acre research farm is the heart of Johnny's, where we trial thousands of varieties and tools every year. Our research team is dedicated to finding solutions to the ever-changing challenges growers face, including disease, environmental or insect pressures, and shifting market trends. We invite you to visit the Growers Library at johnnyseeds.com to find technical resources like the Winter Growing Guide, which has tips on planting and harvesting into the shortest days of the year. You can also find variety comparison charts, extensive Jang roller trial results, and more. The employee owners at Johnny's are working hard to make 2022 a great year, and we look forward to growing with you.
Welcome to the Winter Growers Podcast. Today, my guest is Pavel Orvechkin of Pavel's Garden in Oldham County, Kentucky. Pavel is originally from Russia, moved to the U.S. in 2002, and began farming in 2007. He started leasing land in 2013, 3 acres from a 1,400-acre biodynamic grass-fed beef farm called Foxelo Farm. Using an unheated high tunnel and 5 unheated caterpillar tunnels, he grows year-round, selling to farmers markets and a small CSA. His primary winter crops include Salanova lettuce, spinach, kale, carrots, radish, and turnips, and he experiments with some interesting intercropping techniques in the transition period of early spring to summer. As a small family farm operation, Pavel is able to successfully supply his local community with fresh produce year-round.
I'm good.
Good. Well, so I just wanted to let our listeners know that I learned about you through Jesse Frost of No-Till Growers, who hosts this podcast. And he suggested I reach out to you. He said, you've got a great operation in Kentucky, and you're originally from Russia, and you're doing a lot of production in cat tunnels. So I was really intrigued by your operation, and I'm excited to have this conversation with you today.
Sure. Yeah. I'm likewise.
Well, usually to get started, I'd love to sort of learn a little bit more about your farming story. I'm definitely curious about your experiences growing up in Russia and if you had farming experience there and how you ended up in the U.S. and how you started your farm.
Right. In the United States, I've been involved in so-called sustainable local ag since around 2006. That's when I had volunteered in a local farm, and then actually helped run a small farmers market for that farm, and that had introduced me to a little bit of farm work and what it's like to run a farmers market, which was very exciting. And then in 2007, with my previous partner, who actually had a lot of growing experience and managing a CSA, she had woofed on several farms and then worked on a local farm. So with her, we were invited to move to a farm in Kentucky and outside of Louisville called Foxelo Farm, which is a grass-fed beef farm, a large 1,400-acre farm. And they had converted from corn and soybean production several years prior. And then they were looking for somebody to just grow produce there. And they were willing to provide barn space, a couple acres of growing space for veggies, small propagation greenhouse, and some like limited equipment as part of the lease agreement. And that's pretty much it. And then we moved, and I was still going to school at University of Louisville doing something completely unrelated. And I thought I'd had that farmers market experience, and then and a couple some volunteer experience the year before. I thought, oh, this could be fun, part-time thing. I could still be going to school and then help start a small CSA. And then by the second year, I'd realized that I, even the first year, I was kind of found myself more and more involved and sucked into this work. And then by the second year, I was fully involved, and I had just dropped out of school and was pretty much fully farming. And then we had our first child that first year as well, and we had the worst drought.
Wow.
As well.
Challenging start. So did you actually move to the US for school? And what were you studying before you started farming?
So to go back, my parents had moved in period between like 98 to 2000, along with my brother, who's 5 years younger. And then I was still going to university in Russia. I stayed behind, and I was studying English translation and interpreting. Like it was a technical university. And then my parents had settled here. My dad is in the medical research field, and so he was working for the University of Louisville. And a couple of years after that, in 2002, I had decided to transfer from my hometown's university to University of Louisville. And I was working at the university library as a student assistant, and I was studying communication and a minor in linguistics. And then I was maybe thinking, oh, maybe I'll go to library science. I like working at the library. It's pretty fun. I can, very different from farming. It's like highly air conditioned, structured, controlled environment. And that's kind of the short of it.
And so what really, piqued your interest, I guess, in farming? Did you have experiences growing up? Yeah. What was the intrigue for you?
Yeah. I mean, as a child, I did have some like homesteading, small scale farmsteading experience. But after that, I didn't even, for several years, I didn't consider that sustainable local agriculture was a thing. Like I didn't think it wasn't on my radar at all. Because in Russia, it's not really defined that way. Like in Russia, small scale farms, like sustainable farms, are essentially these. At least back in those days, back in like the 80s and 90s, it's these plots that had been allocated by the Soviet government to a lot of the families, and it was marginal land, meaning that it would be like a 30-degree slope, or it would be under a power line, something like that, and it would be an hour outside of a city, and people would a lot of times would have a diversified small scale veggie fruit thing going, or somebody would have a bee yard instead, and it would have like a summer weight on that plot, so people would just go there mainly during the warm season, and then in the winter a house would be winterized and put to rest. But in the summer you just commute, and so the fact that it was not ideal pieces of land, let's say like our plot was 30-degree slope, I think. So that forced people to create terraced beds. Short growing season forced people to do season extension. So it means little plastic blow tunnels for cucumbers and tomatoes. No commercially available fertilizer means people used made compost, and like in the attic of our that summer cottage, pigeons would roost. So that manure was added to the scraps to make compost. So as a kid, of course, it was fun to go there because there was a creek to swim in, etc. But also you had to work. And so a lot of times as a kid, you don't want to do any of that. You would rather ride bikes in the city with friends. But I remember, double digging beds for potatoes or picking potato beetles, picking raspberries, etc. So yeah, that's kind of the background of like going back. And I'm sure that had kind of deposited in me on some level. Okay. But then I didn't think about that for years. And I didn't think that could be that could be an occupation, that could be a job. Right. And then, after living in the United States since 2002 for a few years, I had kind of, was introduced through friends and hanging out around U of L, just kind of, simple things like, oh, you can be a vegetarian, like that, just trying vegetarianism and thinking about environmental issues. Kind of those were like little steps toward being introduced to ideas of like, oh, like local sustainable ag could be a thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I mean, usually it starts with kind of that environmental health
Yeah,
focus for sure.
but it's like very basic. It was very basic for me.
Yeah. So when did you pick up a book that you remember that kind of got you thinking about, I guess, the world of sustainable ag and how broad it is?
Right. I think it was maybe seeing a documentary. It was something like maybe Future of Food, one of those Food Inc. or something like that. Was one of those early anti-GMO documentaries. And then I met, my former partner, my first wife, and then like, oh, she works on a local organic farm. That sounds cool. So that was very intriguing because I kind of had this like introduction to a little bit to this world. And yeah, I went out to volunteer a few times. I was still, I had hobbies. I wanted hanging out with friends, working at the library, going to U of L. But I remember like going to volunteer several times and just being miserable. Just, like digging carrots and in the heat and humidity, just kind of being thrown out of the air-conditioned library environment into just like the middle of the day in July digging carrots. I just couldn't believe that people were doing that.
And look at you now,
I
right?
just thought it was I thought it was awful, like physically awful, completely awful. But somehow it didn't turn me away. And the year later, we were doing that on our own. So essentially my first year, I was an intern and a farm manager at the same time, and a first-time father.
Wow. Jump right in. Sink
And
or
it wouldn't
swim.
have happened. Yeah, and it wouldn't have been possible without the support of the place that we are at.
Yeah. So describe that leasing arrangement and the relationship. What has worked well with that?
I mean, they pretty much said like, we have a small tractor here, this old tractor that just had been sitting. There was this barn that had been there with some basic equipment, small tiller, small tractor. They had plowed up, I think, 1.5 acres for us, and they said, "Hey, we'll build you a little propagation greenhouse. We will help you with any questions." Like there was a kind of these old school guys helping them run the farm at first, and they are University of Kentucky ag grads. Okay, kind of these old school guys, which was very helpful. I didn't know a thing about operating a tractor. I didn't know a thing about maintenance and even just like basic soil management. When is it too dry? When is it too wet to work the soil? And my wife at the time, she had that knowledge, but sometimes I was by myself having to make decisions. So that was helpful to have those guys around for kind of basic questions like that. And then we emulated everything. We just did everything. This kind of tried to emulate our previous employers' ways of doing things, running a CSA, growing practices, varieties to grow, how to cultivate, etc.
And then what actually got you into the winter part? Because that isn't a common track, for most farmers.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really curious what
Yeah.
inspired that for you.
Honestly, we didn't do any winter growing for several years. So in the winter, we would just have a job and not really grow anything. Do some like season extension as far as, doing low tunnels with row covers and just extending things like kale, doing some late season carrots, and then doing some early spring season extension in the sense of, just utilizing row covers. But yeah, for several years, we didn't do any winter growing beyond that.
And was that more of an economic decision or an experience decision? What sort of changed that for you?
Yeah, because see, the other thing was that so Foxelo, the farm that we lease from, I was able to have a job with them over the winter to kind of supplement my income and to pay rent and buy supplies for the upcoming season. And that just involved doing anything from helping with cattle to cleaning tractors, cleaning out barns, various maintenance. So that just by being able to do that, I didn't feel it was necessary, combined with the fact that I was not confident enough to do it. And I felt like I was lacking tools and knowledge to do it.
And so did you just start experimenting and growing from there and just building your confidence?
Yeah, so then I kind of tried to do more of the low tunnels. I made a bunch of the EMT conduit low tunnels with the Johnny's bender because our winters are relatively mild, and then we would get these cold spells. Would get these like cold snaps that could go dip into single digits. If it's a polar vortex, it would get negative. That was relatively rare back in the day. So I felt like, well, I'm gonna get like really heavyweight row covers, like an Ag 50 or something. And I made a bunch of these hoops. And so I just did a lot of kale and turnips. I tried with, experimented with different kale varieties to see which ones were hardier, and just did a lot of these, like, yeah, heavy row cover with the hoops. And I overwintered carrots that way. It was more kind of like fewer varieties, but trying to do like a decent amount of it. So I did that for a couple of years, and then I just got the Farmer's Friend cat tunnels kits and started to grow in those because I felt like that was an economical way that the opportunity presented itself to do it economically.
So you have 5 of those caterpillar tunnels now.
Yes.
And those are 14 by 100 feet?
14 by 100 feet.
Did you get all of those at once, or did you gradually build that up?
No, I got like
time?
2. I got 2 at first, and then I got a Kiva zip loan to build a Gothic style larger high tunnel, like a 30 by 96. And then after that, I got 3 more of the cat tunnels.
So walk me through the winter. What would be in those tunnels during the winter months? What's your cropping system?
Okay, so now with the tunnels, we're able to grow a greater variety of crops and do a better job at succession planting. So we grow a lot of lettuce, spinach, carrots, variety of kale, mustard, arugula, baby radishes, salad turnips, and in September we start transplanting lettuce and seeding carrots, and then we either direct seed or transplant spinach. We've done both. So yeah, that's I think September through October we plant them out.
And then are you harvesting those weekly you said you have a CSA and farmers markets? So
Yeah.
is that sort of still the markets that you have through the winter months too?
Yeah, so our CSA is just the main season CSA that run, and it's a relatively small CSA. It's 50 members, and that runs from end of May through end of November. And we do 2 farmers markets, one in Cincinnati, our main one is in Louisville. And the one in Louisville is essentially a year-round market, but it's outdoors. And after December, after it's Christmas, we go to a pre-order system. And in the past, we did just do an outdoor farmers market. We just stayed outdoors there and set up a farmers market stand like you would any other time. But if it was snow or extremely cold, you're still out there just for 2 hours at least, kind of with a more traditional setup. And then at some point we went to I tried a pre-order system, but this is pre-COVID. We tried like a pre-order system, but it was just done through email. It wasn't. I didn't have an online store, so it was just email pre-order, and it was just all kind of done on a sheet of paper. I was trying to kind of minimize the time, making it more efficient, and minimize the time being out there, and efficiently get the produce out to people. And then after COVID, we were essentially forced to create an online store, because for a lot of the growing season we did pre-orders through our online store, and that made the winter product distribution a lot more efficient. So we essentially carried over that system that we used during COVID into the winter months.
So those customers would pick up at the Louisville farmers market?
Yes.
So how do you, if you don't have any indoor protection, are you just doing as a pickup now for the products? Because you're not displaying any of those in the middle of January, right? Or
right.
Not easily.
Yeah. So essentially it's just, okay. So before COVID, like when we felt like in March of 2020, we felt like the market was going to be shut down, or at least go in some form or fashion. And what we did was, while the market was still going on, we had a sign-up sheet and we took contacts of all of our regular customers, and on top of that, those that were just there at the market, just literally going up to people and saying, hey, we think the market is going to be put on pause at least, or shut down, or go to some kind of a form of pre-order soon. Give us your information if you want to receive produce. And so we compiled this pretty large list of customers, and that became our newsletter, and combined that with our CSA customers, of course. So that's how we stayed in touch with everybody during COVID, because at some point our market was drive-through pre-order only. And so every week we would send out an email saying, hey, the store is live. And so essentially that same list worked for us over the winter.
And did you feel the demand grow through that time frame too, through COVID and then into the winter?
Yeah. So the COVID year was a roller coaster for everybody. At first, the demand was sky high, and we wished we could have grown more produce. It was just a matter of increased labor to take the pre-orders, pre-package everything, and then run the drive-through. And then when other markets in the area started to go away from the drive-through pre-order model and open up somewhat, we started to see a decline. And we started to worry about the market essentially not surviving if it had stayed in that. And that was creating traffic problems. A lot of the vendors just could not work with that model. So the vendors weren't there. It was just it just had dwindled. But then when we opened it up more, we opened it up to walk-ups. We still did the pre-orders. That helped to kind of level it out. And then when we opened it up more to retail/pre-orders, that was even better. And then into the winter, it just kind of carried over. And the produce availability in, at least in our area, is it's still very limited. There are winter growers, but it's still not a large community, I would say. And so, we have not had a problem of selling everything we grow in the winter just through our Louisville market and our CSA customers, who are not really, in that time, they're not CSA members, they're just customers who pre-order and pick up.
So do you grow any root or storage crops to add to the fresh crops for the winter too? Or are you just focused on fresh?
Yeah, so we do some root storage, and it's mainly carrots. So we grow a lot of bolero carrots and then harvest them in bulk and store them in a walk-in cooler. And then we do some of the mini daikon radishes, Bravo and green lobo, and some Hakare turnips as well. And we will store those. In the past, I feel like that's the radishes is probably the only crop that we did too much, and then we had the hardest time moving over the winter.
The storage radishes.
The storage radishes.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So, and they're very productive. They are relatively easy to grow compared to carrots, let's say. And they take up a lot of space in the walk-in cooler as well. But compared to the carrots, they were not nearly as good of a seller. Some beets as well, and the beets do pretty well. But that's pretty much the extent of the storage crops. We don't store potatoes. The potatoes we grow are mainly sold as the fresh / new potatoes. The winter squash, I used to store butternut squash, grow and store butternut squash. That's no longer the case. The focus is more on the winter squash that you don't have to cure, like acorns and delicatas, that you don't have to cure and you can just sell in the fall season.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the interesting things about trying to offer so much diversity in the winter, with storage and root crops, is obviously you need to have a place to store them. And that can, create infrastructure challenges, just having the space and being able to maintain it. And then there's just the land component. You need a lot of space to grow winter squash, for instance, and trying to manage the land to be productive for your summer market, and then also have that crop in the winter is very challenging, I've found. And then there isn't much money to be made, I've found, in winter squash too. The amount of land it takes up and the amount that you can actually charge is pretty minimal.
Yeah. When I was at a point where I was faced with this dilemma, right? Do we scale up, or do we try to become more efficient on a smaller piece of land? Around that time, I actually went and saw a presentation by Jean Martin. And that kind of came at a perfect time, where it kind of spoke to me in the sense that I needed to focus on becoming more efficient on the smaller amount of land instead of scaling up. And I was presented with the tools to be able to do that. That's when I decided to grow less of the bulky storage crops and not have to utilize this, have to have all that space and labor and storage and curing facilities in order to do that.
I mean, it really does make a lot of economic sense, but I know it's challenging from, a diversity perspective if you really want to have
I agree.
all those crops. But then again, I mean, sometimes I feel like, well, just grow a few for yourself and, leave sort of the bulk of that product to larger scale farmers or other farmers.
Yeah, if we had a winter CSA, then our system probably would have been different. We would have needed to provide as much variety as possible.
Yeah. I mean, I really love seeing these models where farms start to collaborate together and fill the gaps with what, they're not producing. Then maybe they can do a joint CSA that fills all the need without having to grow it all yourself.
I definitely see that as it's always a possibility for us, because We do have our friends who are Rootbound Farm, just down the road from us, certified organic farm, who grows on a large scale. They grow sweet potatoes. They have a sweet potato digger. They grow a large quantity of winter squash. They grow a large quantity of storage potatoes. So it's always in the back of my mind that we could do a CSA where we collaborate in them in getting those crops. So that could be like a winter CSA model. We just right now we're doing.
It's a lot to manage, no matter what.
Yeah.
Hey, podcast listeners, we're going to pause for a moment to hear from one of our show sponsors. Today's show is also brought to you by Tunnel Vision Hoops. Tunnel Vision Hoops designs and manufactures do-it-yourself high tunnels, hoop houses, and greenhouses. With an extensive array of products to help large and small growers become more productive, they have 11 different tunnel widths to fit any application and designs to stand up to weather conditions from coast to coast. Tunnel Vision is also a national distributor of parts and accessories needed to build, maintain, or upgrade an existing tunnel or hoop house. Check out their Tunnel Vision Hoops YouTube channel for instructional how-to videos to help build a great high tunnel or hoop house. Here at Four Season Farm, we have 2 movable high tunnels made by Tunnel Vision Hoops, and they are definitely my favorites. To learn more, visit their website at tunnelvisionhoops.com. Now, back to the show. And so I guess that it brings me the question, do you have any employees, or are you just a family operation at this point? What's your scale?
Yes. We have one employee who works from April through December. And then it's just me and my wife.
And you're able to sort of manage all the harvest and the pack out and everything, just the two of you through the winter?
Yeah. I find it enjoyable in the winter. It just seems so concentrated, and I'm not being pulled in many different directions. It's just kind of, it's easier to stay focused.
What do you love most then about farming in the winter?
Well, of course, it's just pleasant to be in the greenhouses in the winter. It's easier to manage the crops in a lot of ways. It's easier to manage the pest problems, the weed issues. It's focusing on kind of a limited number of crops. Again, just kind of mentally staying focused on that. I think it's good for me, at least. And then, processing everything we have like our pack shed right now is very minimally heated. It's essentially a carport that we attached to the barn. And then it has a roll-up side made out of greenhouse plastic. It's just kind of like, imagine this roll-up side on a high tunnel. So that just kind of seals the end. And then it's minimally heated with a small propane heater. But still, it's pretty comfortable to be in there packing and processing everything.
Is that it? So you just turn the heater on, or do you have some sort of plumbing set up that you can drain it when it's not, or is your temperatures easy enough to not have it heated all the time?
It's just mild enough. So it's pretty low tech, and I'm just going off of what I can get away with right now. If I feel like that it's going to be a cold snap, I'm just gonna drain the hose the night before, and that's really it.
So then, I guess the flip side of that coin, what do you see as the biggest challenges to growing in the winter?
Yeah, the challenges are, because of how intensively the tunnels get cropped, the disease issues, especially with lettuce, have become more of a problem. Like, the lettuce drop where the bottom leaves start to...
The bottom rot?
The bottom rot.
Which is a really funny name if you think about it. Because we never say butt rot, but...
Yeah, butt rot.
Bottom rot.
The drop is also kind of a funny word.
Okay, so you're
drop,
talking... Yeah.
Kind of, yeah. It's just when a lettuce plant looks, it just kind of collapses overnight. And so I'm pretty sure that's soil borne. And, even we crop rotate as much as possible. It's just in the soil. So I'm going to try at least to experiment with landscape fabric and holes for the lettuce. See if that, I know that does help with the bottom rot and or the drop. However, my concern is that we have another challenge is the voles.
Yes.
I'm sure everybody deals with that. So my concern is that we'll create an even better environment for the voles.
Right. What's worse?
What
drop,
is worse?
Bottom rot, or voles?
Yeah.
Pick your
Where's the
your evil.
spreadsheet where's the spreadsheet of loss due to vole versus the drop?
Yeah. Except for, I mean, I guess landscape fabric, the other advantage would be weed control, at least, especially in the fall before you go into the winter. So that's another advantage.
Yeah, I know. But however, with the drop, I've noticed that if we can get the lettuce crop established before we get below 10-day late hour, which is mid-November, I think.
You're at the 38th parallel, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Yep.
So somewhere around that time, if we can get the lettuce crop established before that and then harvested before January, we are eliminating a lot of those disease issues. Whenever I've tried to overwinter lettuce, kind of where it's just, let's say we transplanted too late and then it just kind of grows very slowly for that really early spring harvest, then the loss to disease was greater. Plus, it's just, taking up space.
Now, are you talking about Salanova cut and come again, or are these just one head harvests?
It's a Salanova one cut.
And so you're not doing a second cut on those. Is that not something that works well for you in your environment?
Yeah, again, with the disease pressure, yeah. And then the other thing I haven't mentioned is the aphids is another problem. The longer that lettuce is there, either to slow growth or regrowth after the first cut, then the pest issue becomes more of a problem. And I know that many factors go into that, one being excess fertility, that the excess nitrogen is attracting the aphids. But I haven't, I've tried to manage that by applying less compost for the winter crops. Like last winter, we focused on micronutrients and kelp through kelp application and mineral, like as something like azomite for a broad micronutrient mineral application, and not applying any compost. But our aphid problem was, I didn't notice any difference.
What about irrigation? Do you have any way to irrigate in the winter?
Again, because our winters are mild, I'm able to overhead irrigate. There has micro sprinklers. All the cat tunnels and the big tunnel have the micro sprinklers that are just inverted, hanging upside down. Micro sprinklers that I can use over the winter just on like sunny days where I can open everything up and irrigate and then just drain the lines. It is because our climate is relatively mild.
Yeah, I mean, I've found that if there are sort of aphid blooms, irrigating the soil, flushing the soil out can help, but you have to time it really well. Like you said, you have to make sure that you have sunny days where it can, because otherwise you're going to end up with more fungal issues and rot from the high humidity. So it's a really tricky balance to try to get it just right.
Exactly, yeah. So the rule of thumb is that I prefer not to irrigate over the winter at all. There's really not much need for that. So it's kind of like there is no schedule. There's no irrigation schedule. It's just whenever I feel like it could be irrigated and it's a nice, sunny, windy day, I'll do it.
Yeah. And what about temp extremes? You talked about, some of those that you get. Is that preventing you from harvesting when you want, or is it actually causing damage? What typically are the challenges?
Yeah, so the so-called like polar vortex temperature extremes, we've been seeing them more often, and that does present challenges in the sense that something like a more sensitive crop like Salanova is harder to protect. And so double row covers, triple row covers sometimes is what's necessary. And then it's management and labor in that sense. And it does put a wrinkle in your harvesting schedule. So, you got to be there, first of all, to uncover, let things gradually like the lettuce needs to slowly thaw out. You can't be harvesting slightly frozen lettuce.
Nope.
Because then it'll be bruised and it'll be mealy after you've washed it. So you have to make sure that it's all. But then again, you just relax and let things happen.
Yeah. It's definitely, if you're expecting a predictable schedule with harvesting in the winter, don't count on it because everything changes with the weather for sure.
So so then you can sort of manage your day accordingly. Let's say, it's going to be a sunny, because a lot of times after those really cold nights, the next day it's sunny and bright, and you can let that lettuce thaw out. You have uncovered it. In the meantime, the kale is probably ready to be harvested because the kale didn't have a row cover on it. It bounces back relatively quickly. So you can go ahead and harvest that. You can dig carrots in the meantime, do other things, and then by mid-afternoon, the lettuce should be good to go.
Yeah. Yeah, there's sort of this window from like 11 to 2 that we have up here in Maine where we can usually harvest, things in unheated tunnels. And then, the morning hours might be used for washing the potatoes or the, the storage carrots or bagging onions, all those things that you don't necessarily need the temperature to be perfect outside. So
yeah, it's a race against time because let's say you have several of those really cold nights in a row. Yeah, you have that small window. You got to start not too early, not too late, in order to have enough time, because then you can see the lettuce freezing.
Yes.
Like you look at it and it's freezing in front of your eyes.
Yeah.
And it's over.
Yeah. Or one of the worst things for us is when you're trying to get that spinach harvested, late in the afternoon, and it's starting, you see your breath, in the air, and then you look at the row cover and it's starting to freeze to itself and you can't separate it to put it back over.
Absolutely. And then, that's the other thing. You've uncovered that lettuce so that it gets some sun. You're harvesting it. And then, okay, the lettuce is not frozen. I'm done. You try to cover it back up. The row cover is frozen.
It's frozen. I know.
In the tunnel to the ground.
Those are the times when you ask, why am I doing this?
Yeah. Or you just get frustrated. You rip some row cover.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. I'd love to, you had mentioned in our email about you do some interesting intercropping experiments in the winter. What are those?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in the winter, there isn't a whole lot of intercropping that happens. Okay. It's just, there's a bed of kale, there's a bed of carrots, there's a bed of lettuce, depending on crop rotation. Then when the intercropping actually happens more aggressively is early spring. So either some overwintered crops like a bed of carrots or spinach or kale, for example, going into early spring, or let's say like a bed of carrots that was seeded for like early baby carrots, then they have to make way essentially for tomatoes, let's say really early tomatoes. Then the middle of those beds can be harvested, and then we use like an auger attachment for a drill, and we just were able to plant the tomatoes or cucumbers into those beds that we're still harvesting from. There isn't quite a precise plan on how to do this. We just start all of our certain number of tomato plants, let's say, and then sometimes the timing is not great, and we just essentially just like, okay, we have this bed of carrots, our tomatoes are almost ready to transplant. I'm going to harvest the middle of this carrot bed for baby carrots to make way for the tomatoes. Or let's say like spinach was direct seeded, and it's over the winter, and then early spring it was like a cut and come again with a quick cut harvester. But then when it's time to put something in the middle of that bed, let's say cucumbers, I harvest the middle of that spinach bed just last time and then hoe it out with a wheel hoe, and then using the auger, the drill attachment, drill holes and plant cucumbers. And then after that, the shoulders where that spinach is, that can be harvested, that can be cut once or twice.
And have you found I mean, of course, it's going to interrupt the nice clean flow of flipping a bed, so to speak, where you get to do the normal, broad forking, amending, and all of that. Do you notice any disadvantages, or has the advantage of getting that crop in earlier and still having the other crops to harvest outweigh the disadvantage?
Yeah, so like all the kind of the amending and the broad forking, we do it all in the fall. And then after that, I really I haven't found the need to do it again. Whenever I felt like it could use more broad forking, let's say, instead of a broad fork in that middle section, we would just use a potato digging fork and then go down the middle and broad fork that way. And then apply, let's say, if it needs some like aged compost or some calcium after that.
And these are in unheated tunnels. So one of the issues I've found, because we have a heated or minimally heated tunnel that we flip from, if there is a bed of carrots in there that we have sown in December, for instance, and we're trying to get them out in April, and the tomatoes are supposed to go in. Since we're turning the heat up, for those tomatoes, for us here in April, we have to. It can kind of stress out the carrots or, the other crops that were there. So I see this working far better in an unheated situation.
Can I say so? So we have the flip. It's the flip. The problem is flipped for us. Okay. So the carrots are happy. Carrots are fine. The tomatoes that get planted, and we plant them deep, like 1.5 feet deep. And because they're going into an unheated tunnel, that's stress. They get planted deep, that soil is cold. So what we found, the plants get pretty stressed. Like the tomatoes look terrible at first, and they always bounce back.
Yep, and sometimes make
they
sweeter
always
fruit.
Make it.
Right.
Yeah, they look great. I mean, but it's like I'm always so stressed. Every year I feel like this is a total failure. These tomatoes are done. Also, because there's less air circulation, as much as we can, you provide that airflow, vent the tunnels, and when the tomatoes are stressed, they are susceptible to fungal issues. Like their tissue seems to be susceptible too, because when they're not like a vibrant green plant, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so you get some of this fungal, like it's just like the tissue gets attacked here and there, and that stresses me out. It's like, oh, we're going to lose everything. But every year it works out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they are surprisingly resilient.
They're resilient, yeah. And then and then you benefit from that from them being planted deep for the rest of the season. So I feel like it's worth it. So yeah, essentially like the interplanting crop plan is just start plants every week and then just try to find space for them.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's great. And I mean, it seems so much more essential with winter farming because you have those beds in production already and you need the space. And, it's great to be able to harvest while you're also getting ready for the next crop. So, yeah.
Yeah. And once those tomatoes are getting a little bit more established, those carrots are out of the shoulders. Then we have some Salanova coming up in the prop house. So we'll put the Salanova on the shoulders while the tomatoes are still small, or some early celery or some beets. That intercropping goes further into late spring.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great system, and I think it's essential for a small scale, setup too, because bed space is limited.
Yes. Yeah. So switching from the low tunnels with row covers to cat tunnels and high tunnels, just the flexibility of intercropping became so much more possible.
Well, great. Well, let's switch gears here and move into the lightning round questions. Okay, number one.
Boxes or briefs.
What's your favorite crop to grow, cook, and eat?
I'm gonna have to say anything in the allium family. I mean, I know it's not that unique, but I mean, that just goes into every meal.
And what would you like? What's your favorite allium to cook then?
I would say the most versatile is the candy onion because the kids love it. It's inoffensive. It can go in every time you cook, you can probably use them. So we love the candy onions. And speaking of winter growing, this year we planted some in January in the tunnel, and that provided a great early like baby candy onion. So that was a good addition to the variety. They're fun to grow overall. Anything, garlic, specialty onions like a red lung of Tropea onions. We love those. We added shallots to the lineup, summer leeks, negi onions, regular scallions, purple scallions. I haven't found one that we didn't like to grow or eat.
Yeah, I mean, alliums are one of those great families where, especially with year-round farming, you never seem to have a gap because either something is, in storage that you can eat or it's growing fresh and you can harvest. So there's always an allium to eat any month of the year. Next question. What's the hardest part of farming for you?
The hardest part of farming, I think, is to set boundaries with the farm. Because by my nature, if you let me, I'm just going to keep working at the garden. If I'm left to my devices, I'm just going to stay there. So over the years, getting older and having family and having advice, having guidance from my family, I've learned the importance of, setting boundaries. And, just by having the experience and becoming more efficient, that let me be able to do that as well. Just the fact that the farm/market garden will always ask for more from you. Combine that with the fact that I'm willing and enjoying to do that, it's hard to set those boundaries.
Yes, it's very true. I think that's a common issue.
Because we're doing this because it's a passion. So that's
Yeah.
That's hard.
Yep. I mean, it's the whole idea that there's so much more to life than farming, but a farm
But
does
it's also
provide
life. That's life.
so much life. Yep, exactly. It's a hard one. Okay, what's your favorite tool?
Probably, I want to say the tilther, but I'm probably leaning toward the Glaser wheel hoe because one of them I've had since 2007 and it's still going. The blade has been replaced. I'm talking about just a straight one with like a 12-inch blade on it that I use for like the walking paths and let's say to flip a bed. You use that to undercut the previous crop to flip a bed. And that thing has been, been going. I mean, it's used hard and it's still going strong.
Yeah. There's nothing like a simply made
It's
tool.
amazing. It's amazing. I mean, I know there's other wheel hoes on the market, but that one, it's the most used probably tool and the hardiest of them all, for sure.
What's your favorite music you listen to while farming?
Podcasts, comedy podcasts.
Comedy.
I need to laugh. I need to laugh. I need to laugh.
Do you have a favorite one that you like right now?
Just look for some improv comedy podcasts.
Okay, great.
Yeah, look for some improv comedy. Some good ones. I mean, there's too much. I like to listen to something non-farm related.
Yeah. That's a boundary right there.
That is a boundary. Yeah. Yeah. I like to get my like farm information in kind of these like same with Instagram, you can be so overwhelmed with different tips and things you want to try and varieties you want to grow. But I think it's good to receive that information, these like little drops kind of here and there. And I found that these pieces of information and advice, they come like at a right time when they need to, Like if I'm not on Instagram constantly, and then I'll open it and then I'll see something kind of almost randomly and like, oh, wait a second. This is actually pertaining to my current situation or something I've been thinking about. So I don't feel overwhelmed with all that information at all times. So, and I know can bring a lot of inspiration, the podcast, etc. But again, that I haven't that the boundary thing, you know.
Yeah, well, what's your favorite way to relax or self-care activity?
Hmm. Yeah, good question. I mean, it can be something simple like just watching sports, for example, because it's kind of this like passive activity that you can do. I don't really watch a lot of movies or TV. If I'm going to watch something, it's probably going to be sports. And just that's kind of just a mindless, relaxing thing that I feel like I have to do every now and then. But other than that, just, spending time with my family and, either be grilling or sitting around playing a board game, something like that. We're so lucky that our parents, my and my wife's, they live nearby, relatively nearby. So, going there and spending time with them, that's definitely a huge plus and a way to just get away from the garden and relax. I think that's important.
What's your favorite smell and your least favorite smell on the farm?
Maybe the favorite smell would be, in the winter, in the tunnels, in the middle of the winter, when you prepare for that early spring, like January planting, and you spread some fresh compost on a bed. So and everything outside is, covered in snow or frozen, and that smell of compost in the tunnel, I feel like I really enjoy that.
It creates a natural high. There's studies
Yeah.
that have been done on
Yeah.
the microbes in soil
Yeah.
and compost that.
Or when you break open that like new bag of Vermont compost for that first seeding, that's also I mean it's again it's compost based, but yeah, that aged compost in the winter, I feel like that's a great smell. The least favorite probably maybe a rotten potato. I
Yeah.
feel like that is, give me a rotten tomato, give me a rotten onion, give me, I'm actually kind of into smells. My wife always makes fun of me for like, ooh, that smells bad. Let me take a deep, sniff of that. But like the rotten potato is,
Yeah. That's pretty
there's
horrendous.
not much can top that.
What's one piece of advice you wish you had starting out or something you wish you had done differently?
I would have gotten something like a greenhouse or a cat tunnel earlier.
Yeah.
Probably would have, gotten it first thing and not, focused on, growing like too many sweet potatoes instead,
Yeah. What is your learning edge and where do you feel like your abilities or understanding as a farmer could grow?
I think my learning edge is to just like not getting overwhelmed and just staying focused. And I think that I have a pretty decent sense of observation, just noticing little things. And it could be a good thing or a bad thing, but I remember, like, I hold a lot of that kind of information in my mind. Like, I remember, the crops that were in certain beds from the couple of years before. So, like, the crop rotations for every bed I can hold that information in my mind. And then I remember all the varieties and where things went. So that's a good thing. But then when you try to translate it into a spreadsheet and communicate with employees or my wife, that is a challenge.
Yes.
But on a personal level, as far as my personal growth as a farmer, that was very helpful. And then also learning about a piece of information or a farming tip, And then just by staying focused, like, okay, I'm going to try this one thing. Okay. And just going with it.
How do you relate to that which is out of your control?
Yeah. So, that's again, I get really stressed out when things are getting out of control. Things are going not the way they should, or, the to-do list is overwhelming. But then at one point you have to flip a switch and just let go and move on. And so I don't know how to tell people to do that, but I'm able to. I just, on a personal level, I get stressed out, but then at some point I just, okay, it's how this is, time to move on, and just not think about it.
Yeah. Well, life on the farm is moving so fast that sometimes that's all you can do.
Yeah, but that's just kind of how everybody's different. That's how I am on a personal level. It just, maybe there's something of a, the Russian people, they say, well, it could be worse.
Yeah.
It could be worse. So
Yeah.
at least it's not this.
Yeah. Mm.
Okay, it's how, or this is how it is. Move on. So it's a little bit of this is in me.
Well,
sure.
it sounds like a good, healthy approach. And last question: how will you grow old farming?
I'm sure that if I'm able to, I'll be farming into the old age. But what I would like to do is definitely grow fewer types of vegetables, focus on maybe a small variety of crops. Something that's, crops that are easier on the body. The other thing that I'd like to do is to be able to, and I've been learning that more and more over the years, is to delegate things to others more, to free yourself up, to make it easier on yourself and your mind and your body. Just still be able to farm, but more and more efficiently and on a smaller scale.
Well, good. Well, I'm excited to watch your journey and your farm continue to grow and change. So thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. It's been great learning about your story and more about your winter farming. Today's show was produced by me, Clara Coleman, with support from No-Till Growers. Special thank you to Willie Breeding for the theme music. Thank you to the patrons at patreon.com/no-till-growers for helping to make this show possible. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.